and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotello Esquire and Evan Ginzburg. Would you like to introduce our guest this week, Evan?
Absolutely. He's my friend. He's a wrestling journalist, and I mean that in the best way. Not one of these guys who's obsessing over Raw and SmackDown, but rather a writer who writes about pro wrestling's great history for ProWrestlingStories.com and our mutual friend JP Zarka. He's sporting that T-shirt there. He is Jim Phillips. How are you tonight, Jim?
I'm doing good. How are you doing this evening, brothers?
Thank you, and thank you for having it a night later than we normally do. Last night I was stuck on a major paperwork project that I couldn't get out of. I finally stopped working around 8 o'clock at night, so I appreciate your flexibility. Normally we record on Saturday. And at least one person, at least my brother, said, hey, what happened to your show? So we do have at least one fan that misses our Saturday productions. But welcome to the show. We're big fans of Pro Wrestling Stories. As Evan noted before, we had the pleasure of JP Zarka being on our show before, and he was really a fantastic guest. So I'm really looking forward to having your contributions on the show today.
I want to say thank you for having me. I've always got time to sit down and talk shop with my brothers.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about with you, too. So can you tell me your start in Pro Wrestling Stories when you first started writing for Pro Wrestling Stories?
Pro Wrestling Stories and JP had been talking to me for a long time. I was working with the Gorilla Position at the time, and one of their lead writers over there, senior editor for Classic Wrestling. And I had conversations with JP, and one thing led to another, and Gorilla Position came up for acquisition. And Pro Wrestling Stories got the website, and I followed through with Gorilla Position to those guys. And, man, JP is such a great guy. I'm really happy to be over there working with him.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me about how you started as a wrestling writer. What made you start writing about wrestling?
Well, I've been a wrestling fan ever since I was, kindergarten, younger. I'd cut my teeth on the old ICW promotion, which was not far from where I grew up. And just growing up around the product, and I've always been creative with the writing, and one thing led to another, and I was doing like a blog about 4 or 5 years ago. And the man that owned the Gorilla Position, Ryan Bowman, another great writer and friend of mine.
Friend of the show.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And, well, greatness follows greatness. So, and he approached me and he asked me to come on board there and start working with them. And it really kind of ignited the fire in me. And not so much just to be a statistical type of historian, but to tell the story and to take people to a place, you know what I mean? And give the love that I have for the business through the work. And it's built from there. And I've been blessed, really blessed.
Well, that's exactly the sort of thing that we are huge fans of. As Evan alluded to earlier, we're not fans of the guys who are, said, on Tuesday afternoon over in the Coliseum, Buddy Roberts beat John Tolos with a step over toe hold at 3 minutes and 38 seconds in, We don't care about that sort of thing. I mean, there's a place for it, but we are so much more interested in these outside stories, these things that you can't get from just watching a match. Anyone can watch a match and tell you what the finish was, right? But it's what happens before these guys ever step into the ring, and what happens to them when the lights are all off and the chairs are all folded up and the ring is put away. That's the sort of thing we find fascinating, or at least I don't mean to talk for Evan here, but I think that we share a fascination for that element of it. Now, tell me about like some of your earliest stories. Tell me about how your earliest story first came to you and how you developed it.
The very first story that I wrote for the Gorilla Position, we titled it, I believe it was A Night Like No Other, but it was my very first live wrestling event that I went to with my uncle for ICW at our local Civic Center. And it's ingrained in in my memory, and I took the reader through that moment. I can still smell the popcorn popping and hear the, you know what I mean, the echoes in the civic center, stuff like that. You just don't forget. It's like I say, it's ingrained in your memory, and I want to be able to close my eyes and take those people there with me. And that's how it got started. And then the first series that I did was called Road Stories and Ribs. And I mean, come on, who doesn't like a road story or a rib story? And there was so many of those great ones that spun out of that. And then one thing led to another, and I started doing the historical time, and it bloomed from there.
See, it's interesting to me. The first time I went to wrestling was June 24, 1974, because I'm 103 years old. And I walked into Madison Square Garden, and what popped into my head, and as a writer, when I write for Pro Wrestling Stories, I would tell people, wow, it's in color, because my TV was in black and white. and I was a kid, and it was just awe and wonder. And I don't see a lot of people that can capture that on a page. I see a lot of, I'm not making blanket statements by any means, but I see a lot of the current younger writers just obsessing over angles and, this is happening on Raw and this is leading to the next meaningless pay-per-view. And some of the historians are more, dig into the microfiche and give endless results, but very few are able to capture what were you feeling, what were you thinking, what does this mean to you in the course of your life. And I inevitably go back to your father, your mother, your grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, whoever it was, who is probably gone by now. They took you for some of the greatest nights and experiences of your life. So these nights have great meaning. And, the year my dad died, it was very disconcerting the first time I was at a show without him. It really was, wow, Dad would have liked this. Dad would have liked this. So, wrestling writing is still writing. And I respect guys like you and Javier Aust. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Guys who really can capture these stories as opposed to just a bombardment of information.
Well, if you're just going to throw out facts and figures, every match is the same match that was the last match as your next match. You know what I mean? It's like Buddy said, it's you know what's going to happen. It's about how you was put on the edge of your seat. You know what I mean? I can still remember my father, and he still does it, and it makes me smile every time I see him watch wrestling. I'll be watching the wrestling, but I'm also watching him out of the corner of my eye, because he's sitting there and he's like this. You know what I mean? And he's getting all involved in it, and then I don't know why they got to cheat like that. In the back, I'm thinking it's the work, man, and they've got him reeled in. And you can see it. You know what I mean? And that's what I love about this business. It's that personal connection, and that's exactly what we're talking about. And man, it's you can still see it. Whenever I used to Uber a lot, and people would ask me what I did, you know what I mean, conversations, stuff in the car, and I would tell them, and inevitably you would get two responses when I said I wrote about professional wrestling. It was either, oh, that wrestling, that fake wrestling, and you know how the reaction to that is like, argh. But then the other, you see that gleam in their eye, and it's like you said, Evan, it's oh, my grandfather and I watched that at his house, or I went there with my uncles, or what, you know what I mean? And when there's that personal connection, then you know there's something special there, and you can build on that.
One book I'd like to recommend is When It Was Real by Nikita Brezhnikov. Not that he's Ernest Hemingway, but he captures the feeling, what it was like to be a kid sitting ringside in awe. These guys were larger than life. They were Marvel superheroes and villains come to life as a kid. And he writes in the book, it's very interesting, I overheard them talking to each other. I was getting a little suspicious. I didn't know quite what was going on. And eventually you're smartened up one way or the other. But the book is wonderful because you know, he captures what it's like as a kid sitting ringside and experiencing it as many of us. We were marks as kids. We were looking at this very differently. Yeah.
Yeah, Nikita's a great guy. I'm not as close as you are, but yeah, I call him a friend. He's a good guy, and he's all, you can see it when you talk about it. Like I say, he's got that desire and passion.
Oh yeah, buddy.
Yeah, well, I wanted to get back to you going to see your first match with your uncle. Now, was your dad a fan as well?
My dad is a big fan, but my dad is he was the 50s generation kid TV dad. When he came home from work, he wanted to sit in his recliner and watch his television, and that was his thing, you know what I mean? And as a kid, I wanted to go and get to the matches with him and stuff like that, and it didn't happen as often as I would like. But my uncle is really the guy that sown that seed for me. He was a boxer. He was an amateur boxer around St. Louis, and had worked a little bit around the wrestling business growing up. He was an avid bodybuilder and trainer and stuff. So he was smartened up a little bit, but it was a love of all that. You know what I mean? The physicality and just all that stuff. It was, I don't know, we just cut our teeth on it, man. It was great.
So
I would go back and do it again. I would go back and do it again 100 times over.
Now, you grew up in the St. Louis area? Is
Southern Illinois, about maybe an hour and a half southeast of St. Louis.
Okay. And so who did you watch wrestle at that time?
Oh man, we had wrestling at the Chase on St. Louis. Well, this was back before we didn't have cable, so we had the gigantic monstrosity of an antenna on the roof, and you just crossed your fingers and hoped that the wind was blowing the signal the right way. So we would get St. Louis wrestling. Sometimes we would catch stuff out of Memphis with Lawler if he was working, because they were in St. Louis or Evansville, so they would go up and work Evansville. Sometimes we would get the local TV out of there. But ICW, man, I hate to keep going back to them, but they were on Channel 3, 11 o'clock every Friday night, man.
Well, tell us about them.
Yeah, who were the bigger wrestlers in ICW?
Oh, you're talking the Poffos. Angelo Poffo started the organization, and Lanny, who's a good friend of Evan, and another writer at Pro Wrestling Stories, and obviously the Macho Man. I mean, whenever I was a kid, we all had T-shirts my uncle got us for Christmas, and I was Macho Man Jr., and the Miser was Angelo Poffo wrestled as the Miser. It was a mask gimmick with the money signs all over him and the big cape and everything. And yeah, my uncle got us all shirts, and I can remember watching, you know what I mean, the reruns and just being all into it. And then whenever Coliseum Video had the WWF videos that would come out, you'd go to the video store and there would be the big wall of VHS tapes, and you could just pick out one or two, and we would always watch them on the weekends. Yeah, there's great bonding memories, you know what I mean? Not just about wrestling, but about your family.
I have a big question. Seeing a very, very young Randy Savage, did you see the greatness? Did you see the potential?
Randy Savage was captivating no matter what he was doing. And it was like magic in a bottle, man, to watch that guy work, you know? I remember when him and Pistol Pez Watley was running an angle. It was Pistol Pez Watley and Randy Savage, and I believe Ron Garvin was in on that too. And it was Ron Garvin was shooting against Macho Man, and it was he was looking for Mrs. Macho Man, and they had Pistol Pez Watley in a box in the middle of the ring, all dressed up as a woman. It was just crazy fun stuff. And Crusher Broomfield started there, and that was One Man Gang for people that might know him better there. George Gray, great wrestler, great worker. A lot of guys went through there. Bob Roop, so many greats.
Roop was incredible, and it's a shame he didn't get that, you know, WWF forum or whatever back in the day, because he was as great as anybody. And I saw Pez many times with the NWA in Philly, and he was underrated too. He was tremendous, Pez.
I interviewed Bob Roop for one of my wrestling series. It was Life Through the Lens, and he was where the wrestlers, I talked to him about how the business affected their life and different things. And Bob Roop should have a book coming out soon. He wrestled in front of Saddam Hussein in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was like running things over there, and it was, yeah, he's got an amazing story to tell. That's one of the things that, as a writer, I feel like I've been blessed because, as you guys said at the beginning, you want to be able to look behind Oz's curtain and see the gears turn. You know what I mean? So to be able to talk to these guys and hear their real life stories about how it affected them and different things, I've been blessed to be able to hear that and bring it to other people and open their eyes about it. John McGuire, an amazing example of that. I reached out to John and kind of reignited a fire in him, and he has launchpad himself so much. He's got this book out now, My Life in Heaventown. I was able to get the introduction to that.
That's our buddy. Yeah.
Oh man,
you just mentioned all these friends of the show. It's wonderful that you're connected to all these folks.
Yeah, he's great. It is. I look at it as a family. And I had a person tell me one time, and I'm not going to name drop, but it's a person in the interview business. Tell me one time that these people are just, they'll buy and sell. They come and go. They're not your friend. They're just there to hit the spot and leave. And I don't look at it like that. I want to be able to make a connection and find those stories that they're not going to tell at 1,000 podcasts and interviews and signings. You know what I mean? You got to, I don't know. For me, it's a different level.
How do you get people to say those things? How do you elicit that from somebody? What's your strategy to get people to say that sort of thing?
I've got a little bit different interview style. Like right now, we're having an ebb and flow conversation. And whenever I go into one of my interviews, I put a call recorder on and I tell the people that I'm interviewing, I'm not going to give you a dry question and answer because all I'm going to get is the top 10 hit responses that you give everybody else. I want to know things about the business and about how it affected your life, but it's also about being engaged and asking questions off of what they're talking about, following up with what they're saying a little bit, and not just thank you, yes, what's next. You know what I mean? But I'm a mark at heart. I want to know. You know what I mean?
And that's one thing that I really appreciate about you is that you use the word mark, and it's not an insult. I think we've got to a certain level at which being a mark was a bad thing, and that people aren't supposed to fess up that they love professional wrestling or that they love the storytelling that goes on. It became a swear word to call someone a mark.
I think that if more people loved the art and storytelling of professional wrestling, we wouldn't be going through the downtime that we're going through right now with the creativity. And I know everybody wants to jump on creative in wrestling right now, but I think it comes from the heart, man. And I'm not saying that the current workers don't love the business. Obviously they do, but I'm thinking somewhere that connection's been lost. The great stories aren't being told anymore, in my opinion.
Well, you have TV writers instead of wrestling bookers for the most part. And, these guys are coming from Hollywood, and let's have a soap opera. This guy's marrying this, woman wrestler. And it's just silly, as opposed to, oh, my God, this guy did him wrong, and the face is going to get revenge, and you're emotionally invested. The last time I was really invested in, a wrestling angle, I believe, was when Daniel Bryan was climbing to the top because he was a smaller guy. He was the underdog. This is going back 6-7 years already.
Yeah.
I really haven't been emotionally invested. I'll still see a great match, New Japan or whatnot, and thoroughly enjoy it. But to really care, is this guy going to win or lose, is few and far between.
Well, the WWE Network is one of the, I don't want to glorify WWE, y'all, but the network I really enjoy because you can go back and see all the old stuff. I find myself going back and looking at the old WCW and the old territorial stuff more and seeing some of their interview segments and watching that more so than any of the current product. I think, I got to be honest, the last current match that I really sat through and watched with intent was probably that Boneyard match. And I think with Taker wrapping everything up in his career this year, I think that's the best way for him to go out. That match was great, in my opinion. Granted, it was more of a cinematic movie than a match, but man, it was pretty damn good.
Yeah, that's gotten acclaim as probably one of the better highlights for the WWE for this year, but there have been so many other lowlights, and especially watching how there's almost a war now between talent in the WWE and the corporate side of the WWE. And certainly, I think you would agree with me, when the WWE went public, and started worrying about investors and started worrying about, how do we make a profit so that we can generate that for stockholders, their whole focus changed on how they were approaching the product.
Plus, you can't offend anybody. It became absolute PG, and wrestling is like a good action movie. It's about revenge. The face gets revenge on the heel who did something dastardly. It's like watching a movie. You have to care. If you don't care, it's just two guys doing moves.
Well, and it's the premise is what I think also is missing. One major reason being because there's 100 titles out there right now, and they change constantly. Have you noticed that? I mean, right now I can't even tell you who the tag team champions are. I have no idea. You probably tell me, and I'd go, okay, yes. But then I'd say, how long have they held the belts? And if it's for 2 weeks, then you've probably become one of the longest reigning champions in WWE modern history. It's ridiculous. I mean, the tag team title is held on in a matter of hours now, right? As opposed to people holding it like Demolition for 2.5 years kind of thing. And so you don't really identify anymore with the champions. You feel that's another big thing. I mean, Brock Lesnar holds the title, and that's identifiable, but he only defends it once or twice a year.
In my opinion, I think what you're talking about there is the person that makes the title rather than the title making the person. Like Demolition, Lesnar, these are people that you recognize and people that you know, and they don't really need a title to get over. It's going to help business, and it's going to help, sell stuff and merch. But they're using these titles to try and make people, and I don't agree with strapping up somebody that hasn't earned it. You know what I mean? And I definitely, whenever I see somebody, oh, you deserve it. Man, if you feel like you deserved it, then I don't know what to tell you. You should feel like you earned it, and it's well earned. I don't get down with that deserve.
But I also think because there's a title for everybody now. I mean, you've got the U.S. title, you've got Intercontinental title, you have the heavyweight title. Every so often they'll throw in a TV title. They'll throw in a light heavyweight championship. They'll have a U.S. tag belt. They'll have the world tag belt. There'll be stuff for just SmackDown. There'll be stuff for just Raw. It gets to a point where you don't really have somebody fighting for a title. Doesn't mean as much as it did when Hogan or certainly if we go back to Bruno Sammartino. Everyone was wondering, when would Bruno lose the belt? When would Hogan lose the belt? It created that kind of intrigue. And I don't feel there's any kind of intrigue when a title changes hands, because you feel, well, it will just change hands at the next pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And
there's no meaning behind holding the belt.
That kind of drama isn't there anymore. I just remember one of the feuds that really motivated me when I was growing up was the Tito Santana versus Greg the Hammer Valentine, the Intercontinental belt. And when Tito finally took the championship, was that in WrestleMania 1, right?
I believe
when he
so.
beat Greg the Hammer Valentine? When Tito Santana?
I believe it was.
Yeah.
Kevin?
And
I don't remember.
Nuts went for that. I know it's the years are adding up, on all of us, and it's kind of becoming kind of a blend of some of these things. But I just remember how.
I don't think it was at WrestleMania 1 though.
Oh, was it? It was.
I don't think so.
It was another. But they did show on TV, and I remember when they showed that and how nuts I went for that entire match, and wanting to see Tito Santana get revenge on Greg the Hammer Valentine and win that title. The title was so sewed into that entire feud that it really made, when Tito won the title from Greg Valentine, mean something. And I don't even know who the Intercontinental Champion is now. I couldn't name the last 3 of them if you asked me to.
That's my favorite title too, by the way, the IC title. You always knew you were getting a good match, always.
Let me just say something about the IC title for those who don't know, since we're talking history. Bruno loses the belt. Billy Graham holds it for about 10 months. Okay, Graham loses it to Backlund. And Backlund's not the draw that Bruno was. So all of a sudden, the idea is, let's have a secondary title that means something. So there were nights at Madison Square Garden and all around the circuit where the IC title, whether it was Morocco, Patera, Tito, whoever the case may be, where that meant more to the fans than Backlund's match. When Morocco was wrestling Snuka, we were there to see that more so than Backlund's match, ironically. So they really built up that belt. And at one point, Pedro Morales held it twice. Morales had been the world champion. So that really meant something that he had that belt, and people took it very seriously. And those were some great, great matches. I mean, think about the early guys that held that belt. These are top 10 or 20 all-time greats. Morocco, Patera,
Savage.
Yeah, Savage. I mean,
Ultimate Warrior.
Oh, Ultimate Warrior wasn't a great wrestler, but he was a great draw. Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So nowadays, if you put $1 million cash in front of me, and I'm a wrestling fan, and you said name 6 WWE champions, I couldn't do it. All I remember is Randy Orton won it recently for the 14th time, I believe. But other than that, I couldn't name any of these guys because I don't care. I just don't care.
So what do you think? Oh, sorry.
Once they've lost that emotional investment, I mean, that's the product. It continues to go out of whack, man. It's terrible. It's terrible.
What do you think wrestling needs to do to try to get people to care again?
They're trying to bring back these older guys, and that's just not working for them. They brought Edge back, but with the virus timing, that really hurt them. But still, they're trying to reach back into that nostalgia barrel, and I don't know. I think I liken it back to the early 90s whenever the guys were going back and forth between WWF and WCW and all that transition was happening, and people were like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And we're not going to get another Attitude Era. We're just not. It's not going to happen. But they need to come up with some kind of a fresh idea that is akin to that works in the environment that we have today. And until they do that, we're just going to keep getting reserved the same old leftovers.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, the ratings show that that's not working, well at all. And do you watch any AEW or NXT or the other feds?
Now, I like NXT, and I like what they've got going on as far as storytelling and the way they build their matches up to the pay-per-views and stuff like that. I don't have access to AEW unless it's online, so I've only seen a few of their shows. And other than what, I would like to be able to see what Jericho's doing and some other stuff going on there, but they're not making me want to watch. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
So,
what do you think is the missing element that would make you want to watch AEW more?
I don't know. A lot of these channels have got themselves set up so if you don't have cable, it's kind of difficult to watch their stuff on a week-to-week basis. They need to come up with some kind of platform. I don't know if AEW has a week-to-week website where you can watch their shows or not. I don't know if they do. I'm not subscribed to it. I like New Japan a lot because they got a really good website where you can watch stuff. But I don't know. It's just I appreciate what AEW is doing, and I don't want people to think that I'm dumping on AEW because I'm not. It's not a draw to me. And as far as what could they do, I don't know, something really cutting edge. The intergender stuff doesn't work for me. But
so, rather than us tear down what's happening today, tell us your greatest matches live that you've seen, live matches.
One of the first things that comes to mind, if you're a real wrestling fan, and we're talking wrestling of the late 80s WWF, you remember when Rick Rude was slapped by Jake the Snake's wife, and it started that whole run. Well, that happened at a TV taping in Cape Girardeau, Missouri that we had went to, and they taped like 5 superstars. It was Superstars of Wrestling, the Saturday morning show they had on the hour. And I watched Rick Rude wrestle like 4 times that day. Yeah. And one of the times he come down, they shot that angle. Well, there was about 10 minutes of it that didn't make it to TV, and not because it was too racy, just because it got cut down, of all them fighting through the crowd and Jake coming down and ripping the tights off and all that stuff. And that was really, really fun to be there for that. And then I was at Judgment Day, I believe it was 2003 maybe, whenever The Undertaker fought Red and Yellow Hogan in Nashville. And that was fun to see. And Triple H fought Y2J in the Hell in the Cell there. And that was the same event where Edge shaved Kurt Angle's head. And after that, Angle ran the bald the whole time after. And then I was also at the very first pay-per-view after 9/11 in St. Louis, No Mercy. And just the feeling inside that place when they played the national anthem. People talk about the roof was going to blow off the joint, but to hear the USA chants and, you know what I mean, to get that after all that had just happened, and then we had to go through such levels of security to get into that Savas Center in St. Louis that night. It was ridiculous, but it was just to hear that and feel that, you really did feel like the roof was going to blow up, man. Well, so I've gotten to see quite a few good matches.
We came back from 9/11. Hopefully 20 years later we'll come back from this COVID, because this has been a rough year for everybody. So
as someone that travels a lot, I'm a traveling writer, Evan, as you know this. I've come to visit you guys out there several times. I miss my New York City family. Team Splendid, hello, Naya, everybody out there, Bill. I miss all these people. And it's like I'm not getting able to see my family without being able to travel. So for me, it's been a really, really rough year. I got the motorcycle, though, so I'm sowing the seeds for future projects. So,
and I see maps behind you, so you really are a traveler.
Oh, yeah. Man, I tell you what, travel fills the soul. It really does. I mean, your job's going to fill your wallet, and you can do all you can to try and have all these material things, but get out and experience the world a little bit and see some of life. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm all about.
Well, part of this show is the fact that we can't go anywhere. So I try to do the next best thing, which is, interview people in places that I can't be in thanks to COVID. So every week I take a little bit of New York City and put that in my house, and then St. Louis, Missouri, or where are you at right now? Are you in St. Louis or?
I'm in Denver, Colorado. Here's
Denver, Colorado. It's the base, of course. But we're coast to coast to inland right now. And it's great that we're able to stretch ourselves across the United States and get a little bit of a different view of how everything is around there. Now, are you close to Denver? Where are you near?
I'm about 15 minutes, 20 minutes from downtown Denver. I'm out by the airport. So
Golden? Are you in Golden or?
It's actually called Green Valley Ranch is the name of the subdivision, but it's real close to DIA. I could be at the airport in 10 minutes if I wanted to.
Very nice.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Oh yeah, if I could get out there and use it, it'd be great.
And your mall there has that wonderful Buffalo burger place. Yeah.
Oh, well, I work at a Bison Steakhouse, so.
Yeah, that's one of the there's only 2 places I've had buffalo. One is Tommy's Joint in downtown San Francisco. The other one is over at the Bison place. It was really fantastic. Yeah, Colorado. Hey, one of my very good friends who passed away, unfortunately, hate to say it, a couple days from now, will be the 9th anniversary of the loss of Mark Bison Smith. Not sure if you ever had a chance to know him, because he was an indie wrestler out here in California, but he had his roots in Colorado. So I heard a lot about Colorado from him. It's a nice place to be at. If I had to live somewhere inland, I'd want to live in Colorado.
It's beautiful. I love it here, and we get like 300 plus days of sunshine a year. So people always think it's freezing cold and snow. We get snow from probably November to May. You can be snowed on, but it might snow today and be melted off 3 days from now, and the roads are clear and it's sunny again. So it's all in your perspective. I ride the motors as long as there's not ice on the road. I'm on the bike, man.
Wow. Well, very good. But be careful. Be
Yeah.
careful.
And
I
Jim,
fell over a scooter earlier this year and broke my shoulder. So
Oh,
I
shit.
just, yeah, motorcycles are certainly out of the question. Have you had a chance to actually meet wrestlers in person? And if so, which ones have you met?
Oh, I've met, man, Tommy Rich. I've met him at a independent. He was a real nice guy in person. And then, Al Snow. I met him at OSCW in South Carolina whenever he was working with them. The British Bulldog's son. Man, I can't. Smith, Harry Smith. I met him. I actually had to sit down with Axel Rotten about 8 months before he passed. I used to live in Savannah, Georgia. I'm kind of a rolling stone. I've lived all over the country. I'm, like I say, travel, So whenever I was down there, I was in the Southeast wrestling circuit and friends with those guys. And I was at a wrestling show in Columbia, and I got to sit and talk to Axel before the show because I was there with another one of the wrestlers, Bordell Walker. And shout out to Bordell. And yeah, it's the conversation. We just sat there and shot the shit. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, let me get your autograph, because I'm not the autograph picture type of person. Like I said, I want to get to know the people. I don't want them to automatically be like, oh, this guy, you know what I mean? Or I don't want them to take that tone. But yeah, I've gotten to meet a bunch of guys in person. Snitsky, I don't know if you remember him. You remember Gene Snitsky?
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah. If you get a handshake from that guy, that was a running joke with a few of my friends. Man, that guy will break your hand if he shakes your hand doing the old school handshake. It's like, there's been a lot of really cool guys that you meet.
One of the proudest moments and one of the saddest moments that I had in wrestling involved Snitsky. SmackDown in Sacramento, I won tickets to from the radio show, and Snitsky actually had a match against my friend Tony Jones, the shooter Tony Jones. His ring entrance was 3 times longer than the match itself. I was proud to see Tony in there, but Snitsky hit him in the stomach, powerbombed him, and the thing was over in about 45 seconds.
Right.
So, it's great to see your friend get in the ring, but you're like, boy, couldn't they have just let him have just even a move against Snitsky? But, hey, look, you'll take the payday when you can get it, that kind of thing. But Tony Jones is a really nice guy. One of these days we'll get him on the show. And he was in Beyond the Mat, the movie Beyond the Mat, which Evan knows a few things about.
And Jim mentioned Bordell Walker. This guy is tremendous. He's very underrated. I mean, if you know wrestling, Bordell Walker is a top-notch guy. He hasn't worked for WWE. I mean, he's deserving.
I've seen him do several dark matches, and it just seems like that the timelines for him and them never quite line up. One of the top 10 people that I know that I would love to see get a big break. He's wrestled all the big names all across the independents all over the country.
Yeah, I've seen him live. I'm impressed every time I see him, and I'm jaded. I mean, the guy's the real deal. So
yeah, he can go, man. He can go. There's a real famous story that amongst the buddies and stuff that Rick Steiner had tried him in the ring because he thought, this is a young kid cutting his teeth or whatever. He thinks he's hot shit. And Rick tried him in the ring, and Bordell backed him up and put him down, and let him know I'm not going to be ran over like that. It's a real. I don't want to tell his story for him, but it's a real famous story in the cliques.
Speaking of stories, which of your stories, articles, historical pieces, however you want to label them, are you proudest of? Which come to mind?
I really like the work that I've been able to do with the Glow girls. The Roxy Astor interview I really enjoyed, and then I talked to Patricia Summerlin and Jeannie. Kevin Sullivan was a really fun interview. That guy, man, I could talk to him about wrestling all night. And then, of course, John McGuire. I would have to, maybe that Sullivan interview might stick out as maybe one of my favorites. I love them all. It's hard to say, you know what I mean? Pick which child you like the best.
I actually went to Florida mid-'80s on vacation and saw Sullivan's Army live, and man, that was an amazing, amazing group of people. Mark Lewin and Bob Roop and the whole deal. And the main event that night was Flair and Wahoo McDaniel in a cage. Okay, and Sullivan's Army, under that. I mean, that's how loaded those shows were back in those days. And yeah, it was quite a gimmick. And people don't realize, in the 80s, that was very controversial, like Sullivan doing Satan kind of stuff. And
the Fallen Angel.
Yeah, Fallen
Angel.
Yeah, no, even out here in California, even though they never performed out here, they were pretty legendary, for the Purple Haze was.
Yeah, that was Mark Lewin.
That was Mark Lewin.
Mark
yeah.
Lewin, yes.
Yeah.
No, it was. I always wanted to watch them perform, but we never were able to, except on the rare cases that I got to see Mid-South Wrestling out here. They had Mid-South Wrestling on cable. Now, if you could go throughout time and interview somebody, anybody, living or dead, who would you do an interview with?
Wrestling business alone, because I'm diversified interests. There's a lot of people I'd like to talk to, but wrestling business alone, man, Randy Savage would be pretty high up there for me just because I've been such a fan for so long. But Rick Rude, if I could.
So let's go back to Randy Savage.
Sure.
What one question you get to ask him? What's the first question you ask?
Wow. I'd have to ask him about the Mega Powers and if there was any real heat between him and Hogan and how much of that was based in reality. Because, my God, two of the biggest egos in the business at the time, throw Elizabeth in the mix, there had to have been a little bit of reality there somewhere,
Yeah, no, okay. And then you were going to name some other wrestlers that you would want to interview.
Oh, man, Rick Rude would be a great one to interview. Ray Stevens. I couldn't think of his name. And for a California boy, I mean, that guy, he's the epitome of how to get over in the business, man. He put other people over and got himself over at the same time. He worked both sides. It was, yeah.
I've interviewed hundreds of people over 30 years, radio, TV, film, and I'm telling you guys for a fact, so many of the legends tell me that Ray Stevens was the greatest of all time. Prime Ray Stevens. I saw him in the 80s, WWF, AWA. He had already lost a step or two. But Ray Stevens, Cow Palace, Ray Stevens, 10 years earlier.
He was our Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Ray Stevens was our Ric Flair. Pat Patterson was our Hulk Hogan for the Bay Area.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Those two guys sold everything out. We also had the fortune of seeing Peter Maivia, and Pepper Gomez. They were always, sellouts whenever they would show up out here. I didn't get to see him wrestle, but my great grandmother was a huge wrestling fan, and she used to whack the guys with her purse as they would come down the aisle, and the wrestlers knew who she was. So it was. It skipped a couple generations, and then it finally hit me. My dad has nothing to do with wrestling, and most of my other family, turns their nose at it. But it just shows that it can be built in, even generations go by. The wrestling bug will finally get you.
Well, let me flip the interviews. Let me flip it on you. What drew you? What drew you to wrestling? If you say your family wasn't involved in it, what drew you to the business?
I am a true connoisseur of the fighting arts. I mean, I don't watch fighting for fighting's sake. I watch it like an art project. I analyze it and I watch everything about it. I mean, every little, whether it's two guys doing sword fighting on TV or a Bruce Lee movie or, Western fight or Batman, the old Adam West Batman stuff or Star Trek, if it's choreographed fighting, I find that to be about the most fascinating thing I can watch. And you know what? Isn't that the way the world is? Because why would that stuff not be popular as it is internationally if people didn't find that fascinating? So, but what I found, well, I was thinking about this because I now do a job where I do a lot of driving. And I was trying to think of why I love wrestling so much. And it went from being just a living cartoon like you guys were talking about, like you were mentioning. And yet now I've seen the other side of it so much that it's become a human side thing for me. And it's the human element. I never thought I would love wrestling for the side that has nothing to do with wrestling in it, the human element of it. But I do.
Buddy, I'm finishing a book now, basically a short story collection on my life and some of the legends I've worked with, befriended. Some of them slept on my couch, etc., so on. And I have pieces on wrestling promoters burned through hundreds of thousands of dollars and died in welfare hotels. And one promoter, I was at his memorial service. I was the only person connected to wrestling there. So he squandered his life fortune, his life savings, a small fortune, died in a welfare hotel. Okay? So I'm doing a book that's all about the other side of pro wrestling, not all grim by any means. I was on a plane with Johnny Valiant on 9/11, what that experience was like, etc., so on. And like human interest pieces. And getting back to where we started at the beginning of the interview with Jim, I'm more interested in these larger-than-life personalities, who they are as human beings, what they've been through, as opposed to this angle in 1977 or, this Booker in 1982 or this result. Because Johnny Valiant was also an actor, and he said to me, Evan, Al Pacino could walk down the street with sunglasses and a baseball cap and nobody will notice him. But the wrestlers are larger than life. Not just because they're big. They're just so charismatic, the stars. And some of these guys are fascinating human beings who, have wined and dined with kings and queens, like Dusty Rhodes said, or they've seen the other side of it where they're pushing a broom after it's all over, or working the door of a strip club after the glory's over. They've been to the top, they've been to the bottom, and, these are some amazing stories. And, sometimes I just lose patience with the obsessives who, let me give you 20,000 wrestling results. Well, Bruno and Killer Kowalski wrestled hundreds of times. Bruno and Waldo Von Erich wrestled hundreds of times. Bruno and George Steele wrestled hundreds of times. Maybe some of that isn't as interesting as tell me about George the Animal Steele, the other side of his life where the guy's working in a school, Yeah. I mean, that to me is more interesting, So it's a fascinating business, and Jim does amazing work. Formerly with Gorilla Position, now with ProWrestlingStories.com, and Jim.
Pro Wrestling
Post, Mark Madison.
Can you tell me, is there a difference between what you're doing for Pro Wrestling Stories or for the Gorilla Position?
Gorilla Position is done for the most. Basically, Pro Wrestling Stories bought them up.
But do you find that you're doing anything different now that you're in Pro Wrestling Stories versus when you were at the Gorilla Position?
Really, I don't think so. No, because I try to do more of the fireside chat storytelling end of things. So I kind of got a niche for myself there that not a lot of other guys are taking advantage of. But I don't think so. I'd like to think I'm still doing the same thing. We don't have a lot of. At the Gorilla Position, I did a lot of running series where I would do a 10 or 12 part series. And we don't do that type of long running series at Pro Wrestling Stories. It's each story stands on its own merit. So other than that, I don't You know what I mean? I don't see a difference there. I love it there, though. I love working with these guys. And I wanted to mention Pro Wrestling Post. I want to make sure to mention that because Mark does a good job as well at trying to get into the storytelling end of things. And it's not just a spewing of facts.
Oh, that's we've gone over that and all that sort of thing. And there's I did want to ask you, because I do ask all of you wrestling historians the same question: why is pro wrestling history important?
For my point of view, and the most honest, forthright answer I can give, it's because of these guys, not just the guys that were on top, but all the guys that have been in the business who have went out and wrestled for nothing, traveled all over the country and gotten their bodies handed back to them crippled for nothing, just like Evan was just saying. Their legacies deserve to be preserved, and they've earned that. And for me, that's what it's about. You can hear the same stories about, and I'm not discounting Savage and Steamboat WrestleMania 3 by any means, but you can hear that story all day long. There's other stories out there that are just as good that can be told, that it will engage you and make you love the business just as much. You know what I mean? So for me, it's about maintaining that legacy more than anything else and opening people's eyes. Maybe someone that's not a wrestling fan that reads that story that's like, man, that was a really interesting story about that person. And maybe it makes them want to learn more about the business that they didn't know before. And
let me just add to that. Legendary wrestlers have literally appeared around the world on TV in huge arenas. They've entertained millions upon millions of people. This is pop culture that deserves to be documented and means something to a lot of people. And again, going back to the start of the show, these are your fondest childhood memories as well. So I tell people all the time, I'll rattle off 20 great musicians that I love, but I will also say some of the best nights of my life was seeing heel Roddy Piper at Madison Square Garden, and Bruno and superstar Billy Graham, and the building shook. The building shook. Seeing Ric Flair in Philly, these were some of the best nights of my life looking back. And, I'm not a kid anymore. So, when you can make a statement like that, it means something to you and it means something to a lot of people. And my childhood heroes might not be somebody else's childhood heroes who's younger or older than me, but they could tell you the same thing. My cousin's from England. He talks about seeing the guys in Liverpool when he was a kid, and with the same passion. I was with my dad. My dad's gone. I saw Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks with the same feeling, and this means something to a lot of people, and it deserves to be documented. And it deserves to be documented the way Jim does it, with passion and feeling, and not just an obsessive collection of dates. And, like Buddy said at the beginning, this match was 3 minutes and 12 seconds. That's not the point. The way Jim does it.
Thank you very much for that. I thank you very much.
I mean it.
That means a lot to me.
Yeah.
So, Jim, we're almost out of time here. But I want to get just a real quick thought from you about the future of wrestling. Where do you think it's headed? Do you think we're ever going to recover from this COVID crisis and people will be able to pack arenas again and we'll get back the live audience, which is obviously a big missing element to what makes wrestling great?
Yeah, they need to be able to feed off of the kinetic energy in the building and off of those fans. It's hard to say. I think that as far as the COVID and the virus and all that goes, with the flu season coming up, it might be getting worse before it gets better. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but as far as large gatherings of people, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the digital audience that we've got right now. I don't really buy into that much. The business itself is cycles, and I think it'll come back around. Hopefully they'll come up with something inventive to grab our attention. And like I said earlier, I want to give you that fish hook to draw you in. That's what I really want. But I don't know. It's such a everything's so different right now. You know what I mean? I don't remember in my lifetime going through anything like this ever before, ever. You know, and it just crept up and it jumped up out of nowhere too. You know, it was just like there was rumors about it, and the next thing you know, man, everything's to a screeching halt. It's crazy.
Hopefully next year we won't be having a discussion like this, but
hopefully soon. Hopefully, I want to travel again.
Yes. So we're running out of time. I want you to have enough time to promote any projects that are coming up, your website, anything that you'd like to tell our viewers about.
Well, upcoming on the Pro Wrestling Stories, there's going to be a story this week that coincides. Today is the first day of the November Grand Sumo Tournament in Japan, and it runs for the next 15 days through the 22nd. So this week's, I'm going to have an article about sumo and how it's ingrained more into the professional wrestling business than most people realize.
Cool.
It's not just the regular gimmicks. There's a lot more going on there. So, yeah, I'm real happy about that. And with the acquisition of the motorcycle, it's been a long time coming, but I'm trying to move on to that cross-country road trip where I videotape wrestling all over the country and paranormal haunted stuff all over the country. I've got several different passions. I've used this time to try and stage myself to launch into something new, you know, so that's where I'm at right now. But
hey, if you're in San Francisco, look me up, you know. If you're out in the Bay Area, I'll take you to wherever we can meet at Winchester Mystery House. You can, you know.
That's on the list of stops that I would like, places I want to go. Eastern State Penitentiary, the Winchester House. I've got the Stanley Hotel right in my backyard, so I go up to Estes Park and visit the Stanley on a regular basis. So, yeah, all these haunted places. My buddy Bobby out in New York, he's got some haunted places we're going to go to.
Plan a trip over to the Queen Mary in Long Beach.
Oh, excellent. You're talking my game now. See,
I've been in all these haunted places. I've never seen a ghost, but I've been to all these haunted places. So
I get a feeling like I've got a weight on my chest, almost like a big, I don't know, like a heavy weight, hard to breathe and tightness in my chest every time I've been someplace that I know for sure something bad has happened. So,
wow. Hopefully you're not getting that feeling during this interview. That's as long as you don't have that going on during the interview. We'd love to have you as a guest again on the show. You've been absolutely delightful. You made this hour just disappear like we just got started talking, it feels like.
Yeah, we could do this all day, boys. We could do it all day. Anytime you want to have me back, you just let me know, and I'm all in.
We'd be glad to have you as a guest again. And why don't you mention how the fans could check out Pro Wrestling Stories, and if they want to get a hold of you, how they could do that?
Check me out on my Facebook, Jim Phillips, or you can go to ProWrestlingStories.com, ProWrestlingPost.com. If you look up GorillaPosition.com, it's archived at Pro Wrestling Stories, and we'll route you back through there. I've got probably 10 pages of work at the Gorilla Position that you can go and see. The YouTube is going to be coming up soon. So, yeah, keep your eyes open. Things are coming. I've got the introduction in John McGuire's book, My Life in Heaventown. It's on Amazon. Support John. He's a good friend of mine. So, yeah, I'm out there.
And speaking of books, Mickey Doyle's book is out. Just came out. Irish Mickey Doyle. He was on the show about 2 weeks ago. And,
nice.
That's available on Amazon. And Mickey's a good guy. And talk about living history. The guy worked everywhere. So support Mickey Doyle's book as well. Yeah.
But this was a great interview too, and we really appreciated having you. And that's all the time that we have for this week. So we'll say goodbye to everybody and see everyone next week. Thanks you so much for being our guest.
Thank you, my brothers.
Thank you.
Have a good night.